Coming up on this edition of the Black Vault Radio, retired detective from the British Transport Police, Gary Heseltine, steps into the vault. Beginning in 2002, Detective Heseltine began a UFO reporting database exclusively for law enforcement officers. The result is a highly credible listing of unexplained encounters from some of the most highly credible witnesses that you can find.
And basically, as he drives around the corner within the town, he comes across an object that is blocking his path, i.e. blocking the road, and it's hovering about 5 feet off the ground in the middle of the road. He gets frightened, he goes back to the police car, and as soon as he gets back to the police car, he then says he has this sensation of being engulfed in white light. And it doesn't come from left, doesn't come from right, there's no noise, but this huge object, the size of a football field, suddenly blinks on in front of them. Not too long after his sighting, and said, we want you to sign the Official Secrets Act again, which he found odd. And on the part 2 of the document that he signed was, you are not to talk about your UFO.
All that and much more. So stay tuned. The Black Vault Radio is about to begin. More than 20 years ago, I began a journey. My quest for the truth. My name is John Greenewald, and I have hammered the United States government with Freedom of Information Act requests trying to get answers. I have more than 2 million pages of declassified documents for you to download at theblackvault.com. Now, I attempt to dive even deeper and talk to some of the most brilliant minds on this planet. No government secret is off limits, and no question is off the table. All I aim for is the truth. This is the Black Vault Radio. That's right, everybody. This is the Black Vault Radio. I am your host, John Greenewald Jr. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in, making this your podcast and radio show of choice. I know that there are thousands of options out there for you, so no matter which way you are listening, whether it be iTunes, Google Play Store, Stitcher, TuneIn, and all of the, even Spotify now for all of those requests out there, thank you for doing that. It is the end of the week. I bet some of you thought that I wasn't going to get a show in. Well, I was on that list as well. I have been a bit under the weather and have been on and off for quite some time. All you parents out there, especially those of the newborns and the toddlers, will completely appreciate that our now 4-month-old daughter just started daycare. Well, she is bringing home everything under the sun from all the other babies in that daycare. And it's not fun, let me tell you, because when daddy gets hit hard, and that's where I've been. So I do apologize a little bit for my voice as we get going here. But that being said, I wanted to get this show done for you because it's going to be a great time with a retired detective, Gary Heseltine. He's joining me all the way from the United Kingdom. Now, the connection is going to be the best that I can make it. We're experimenting a little bit with our international guests here on the Black Vault Radio. So hopefully everything will go smoothly, but obviously international guests and audio is not always studio perfect. So we're going to see how that comes out. Gary Heseltine is coming up in just a few minutes. For those who follow the Black Vault on social media, make sure if you don't to do so. I dropped some pictures today that really I wanted to give out a special thanks to my publishing company that has published Inside the Black Vault, The Government's UFO Secrets Revealed. That is the book that I am coming out with in April. I try not to plug it every single show. I'm sure you guys are done hearing about it. But I really do want to thank them for their support with this title. Now, UFOs is definitely not high on their list of publications that they do. They took a bit of a gamble with me. I know that. They didn't put it that way, but I am. Because let's face it, UFO books, they're tough to sell. Just simply because there's a lot of, not only there's a lot of UFO books out there, but a lot of them really kind of veer well away from the world of nonfiction documentation and evidence. Now, that's not to put them down, don't get me wrong, because there's a lot of great UFO books out there. However, a lot of them don't bring some of that supporting evidence with them. So that kind of rules out certain publishing companies really backing the book. Well, Roman and Littlefield took a gamble. We worked together and put together this book that's coming out in April. I'm not going to lie, I'm excited about it. I worked really, really hard on it. It's the culmination of 22 plus years of research. But also I'm going, I'm working with this publishing company and going to their, experts. I'm not, but they're experts on publishing and grammar and spelling and all that with a UFO book. And it was a bit intimidating, I will admit. They've been fantastic and they have been outstanding and they have been incredibly supportive. Now, why am I bringing this up? Well, to my surprise, I got in the mail the newest Roman and Littlefield catalog, which lists, I don't know if it's 100% of their offering, but there are a ton of books that are listed in their new catalog. To my surprise, when you open up the cover on page 1 of the listing, it's technically page 2 of the catalog, but page 1 of the listings of books, my Inside the Black Vault is listed as the number 1 highlighted book that they are featuring right now. That in itself, I think, is a testament to their support to this subject and to this title. And I want to really take the time to say thank you to them for that. Because again, this isn't they just took a gamble and are publishing a book. They believe in it. And to those who are listening, who appreciate the UFO topic, who want more serious approaches to it, well, I'm hoping that this book will deliver that. But on top of that, it's a reputable publishing company that's actually bringing it out. They are spearheading the movement to get this in every brick and mortar bookstore out there, to really market it in many different ways. And that's something that I'm very, very thankful for. If you are interested in this title, you can pre-order it online right now at www.insidetheblackvault.com. Or for those, there's a lot of requests for this, a Kindle version. A month or 2 ago, I was unaware exactly how that was going to work. The Kindle version can actually be ordered as well. That is on Amazon. So just search for Inside the Black Vault on Amazon, or I will link it at the show notes page at www.theblackvault.com/show notes. And I will link over to how you can pre-order on Amazon, including the Kindle. I've also received a ton of questions about an audio version. I don't know the answer to it as I sit here on March 1st, on Friday, wondering if that will come to fruition. I'm working on getting a better answer for you other than shrugging my shoulders and saying, I don't know. But anyway, thank you to Roman and Littlefield for being such an amazing partner in this venture. And I know that we all, me included, I kind of roll my eyes with the amount of UFO books that are out there and self-published books, which there's nothing bad about that. But the number of books that are out there is overwhelming, especially for those who really want to figure out what the good information is. Roman and Littlefield really, really has been supportive. So I wanted to make sure I give them a very quick shout out. The other news that I wanted to bring up, this is just more of a quick technical note, but on the blackvault.com, for some of you who wanted an extra layer of security, that has now been implemented. And what I mean by that is the site itself has been secure. Knock on wood, it's never had a security breach. No personal information has ever been hacked out of there. Not that there's really anybody has their personal information in there anyway. I have been attacked before. In fact, there are literally thousands of attacks on that server every month. However, it is now all operating under a SSL certificate. Now, what does that mean in plain English? Well, that means that the browser communicating with my web server is now 100% secure under what's called an SSL layer. You'll know that when you shop on Amazon. I don't ask for credit card information or anything like that, but that's the security level that the Black Vault now is under, including when you download the documents. So for those that might be a little bit more on the I don't want to be insulting by saying this, but paranoid that somebody may be looking at what you're downloading and so on, well, rest assured, because now everything is under that extra layer of protection under SSL. If you see any quirks, any bugs, anything like that that's not working right, please let me know. I cannot test every single page because there are literally tens of thousands of pages now that link together and then link over to the nearly 2.1 million declassified documents. No way I can just kind of click through, make sure everything's working. So I need to rely on you all that are listening. Click around, see if there's any problems. If anything's not working, definitely let me know, and I will get it fixed as fast as possible. Retired Detective Gary Heseltine, he is coming up on the TBV Dialogue segment talking about law enforcement officers and their encounters with UFOs. And I believe we will also be getting into a case that deals with an abduction. And that was something I wasn't really expecting to be brought up in an interview about law enforcement officers and their encounters. But with some pre-show prep with Gary Heseltine, it's a pretty interesting case. So we'll make sure that we get into that. That's coming up. Stay tuned. On this episode's TBV Dialogue segment, I welcome retired Detective Constable Gary Heseltine. He served in the Royal Air Force Police from 1983 through 1989. Then he went on to an almost 24-year career in the British Transport Police from 1989 through 2013. Gary was a Home Office trained detective constable for 19 years, working on investigations that included murder, manslaughter, and rape. He was an advanced police interviewer of witnesses and suspects, and was also involved in the London bombings terrorist inquiry as a specialist interviewer of first responding police officers. In January of 2002, while still serving as a police officer, he launched an unofficial national database for police officers reporting UFO sightings in the United Kingdom. Gary has published multiple UFO magazines, currently publishing the bi-monthly UFO Truth magazine. He also has a special focus of research on the Rendlesham Forest incident, which is considered Britain's most famous UFO case. He's currently working as the lead researcher and co-writer of a major independent feature-length documentary called Capel Green. It's currently in production in the UK and the United States, and it's due for release in the spring of 2019. Gary, it's an absolute pleasure to have you joining me. Welcome to the Black Vault Radio.
It's a pleasure to be on your show, John. It's something I've wanted to get together with you for a long time.
And the feeling is definitely mutual. I have always been intrigued by your story, your background as a police officer, obviously paving the way for a great background to tackle the UFO mystery. Now, as I had mentioned in your introduction, back in 2002, you started this unofficial national database for police officers who have seen and experienced UFO sightings. Tell the audience what exactly motivated you to do that.
It's a strange, long story, but it begins with a childhood sighting at the age of 16, which gave me, I guess, the catalyst, the interest. But it was only much later in my life, and I was 42 when I created the database and launched it in January of 2002. In between, I'd led a life, had 2 children, married, divorced, that kind of thing, but it was always there in the background. And cutting a long story short, by the time of 2001 in particular, a number of things had happened. I'd attended my first UFO conference run by the then great, sadly departed Graham Birdsall, which was like a big 3-day international conference. And as I went, I just felt myself being drawn towards wanting to get involved. The question was, as a detective, by the very nature of the job, time is not your own. You cannot be there, say, every Thursday. It doesn't work like that. If there's a major incident, you end up working many, many hours and days until hopefully the case is solved. So it had to be something that I could do around my own schedule. And basically, cutting a long story short, I had a dream. and the dream was create a database. And I went to the editor of that magazine, who I'd got to know in the preceding 2 years, and called Graham Birdsall, and said, look, I've had this idea for a unofficial national police database to collate and collect British police officer sighting reports. Would you allow me to write an article to launch it? And because he was very interested in credible sources, and he deemed the police a credible source, or a police officer a credible source, he said, yeah, write your article, I'll back you on this. And he very kindly allowed me to launch the database via UFO magazine in January 2002.
Graham Birdsall was an amazing human being. I got to meet him quite a few times. He left this planet way too early, but he was an amazing human being. I'm glad he got you to do that.
Well, I consider him my mentor, John.
Yeah.
Because in that last 2 years before he died, as I say, there were many steps that led me to go in public. He was really the person that encouraged me to come forward. And so I refer to him as a mentor, somebody who supported me, and I'm always going to be very grateful for that.
Yeah, and not to repeat myself, but he was an amazing human being. For those who aren't aware of him, definitely do some searches on what he did with the magazine and what he brought forward, and my guest obviously being one of them to mentor him into the field. So Gary, let me ask you, at this time when you had kind of dreamt of this database, were you hearing fellow officers having UFO sightings and they were just afraid to talk about it, or did you just guess that police officers were seeing things and you were hoping that they would talk to you? I mean, what were you experiencing?
No, I was already aware of perhaps 6 or 7 historical cases involving British police officers, and I just figured that there's probably going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of more out there over the years. And so, having had the idea, and with the help of the article, it was really to test the water to see if my theory was true. And the article promptly got probably 6 or 7 officers that were unaware, I was unaware of, to come and contact me by email, by post, by telephone, to tell me their stories. And so I knew that I'd tapped into a real source of information.
Here in America, there's a wide-held belief, and there's a reason for it, that when you're a police officer or, active duty military or, politician, that they don't want to come forward here in America because they're afraid of ridicule and, people making fun of them and ultimately destroying their career. Obviously, you're joining me from the United Kingdom. Is it the same over there? Is there a fear for people to come forward, or is it a little bit more lax than it is here in America?
No, I'd say it's exactly the same historically. The two common reasons why anybody doesn't come forward is the fear of ridicule and the perceived risk to their career. Over the years, obviously many other types of people have contacted me as well, from doctors, architects, people that are running nurseries and things like that, and that is their always big fear. And now some people are prepared to go public. The general rule is, police officer wise, is that if you are still serving, you then come on as a confidential source. And the way that works is they tell me about their sighting, and then they have to prove to me who they are, i.e. evidence of their police career, photographs, various different things that police officers would know, to prove to me that they are who they say they are. Once they have proven their background, then I give them confidential source status.
Now, let me ask you about the database. For those who are on the internet now and listening and streaming this show, you can visit Gary's website at www.prUFOspolicedatabase.co.uk. And of course, all of these links and everything Gary and I will be talking about are going to be in the show notes at www.theblackvault.com/show show notes. Just go ahead and find this episode, and you will get everything linked over. Now, for those that are going to the website now, talk to me about what you have on it. Is the full database accessible? How does that work with everything that you have collected since 2002?
In many ways, the database is probably needs a good revamp. It's a very simplistic format, and I did that deliberately because I didn't want it to appear jazzy. I kind of wanted it to look semi-official, and so basically there are a number of headings, and the sightings are catalogued basically under two types. I will accept a serving officer's report, so an on-duty sighting report, and also an off-duty sighting report, providing that officer was in the police at the time of the sighting. Because when you are trained as a police officer, you are trained in how to deal with going to a scene and how to write things up for court. And whilst nobody is infallible, that's a pretty good method for going to any type of incident, including a UFO incident, and basically making a note of the time, date, place, and recording things in a chronological order. That's the kind of police training you get. So if you are off duty with your wife, which is often the case, and you see a UFO, for my mind, that's just as valid a sighting as an on-duty report, because you're using the same level of thought process with your police training to report it in what would be considered a factual, concise way.
And your on-duty sightings go back to, it looks like 1901. So you've obviously been collecting even, older reports than when you started. Tell me.
Very much. It's not just police officers that have contacted me. Probably, let's look at the figures where we are now. After 16, almost 17 years of research from 2002, I have over 550 cases going back to 1901, involving over 1,100 British police officers, which is quite a lot, I think.
Yeah, that's a great number. That's pretty amazing.
yeah, but ironically, the more successful I've been, and as the numbers grew, the mainstream media don't pay any attention whatsoever.
And why do you think that is? I want to get into some of the specifics of the sightings, but why aren't more people paying attention to this? I mean, you're not talking about 3 or 4, 10 or 12, but if you've got well over 1,000 police officers, not just witnesses, but police officers who are seeing this, sometimes in uniform, sometimes without a uniform, doesn't matter. Like you said, the sightings are still valid. Why aren't more people paying attention?
Well, first of all, let me put the percentage roughly that are on duty. It's about 70% that are on duty sightings. And so that's obviously quite a lot. If you think of the 1,100 or so police officers, that's 800 or so that are in uniform or CID in plainclothes but are on duty. So that's a big number. The reason why is, sadly, we have followed America's lead following the Robertson panel in 1953 to downplay and debunk people, and hence why we're still talking about this fear of ridicule and risk to their career. It all stems from that debunking process. So that's really why that is the way it is. And in working with the media, which was what the plan of the Robertson panel was, certainly in Britain, the mainstream TV companies, the ITV, the BBCs, etc., they have become willing, I think, at the higher echelons of the organisations, a party to allowing this to continue, and probably they are naive and ignorant of the true facts. But we still live in that era. I'm afraid we have good documentaries, we have silly documentaries on UFOs. There is no consistency, and there is no real attempt to give an unbiased, genuine reporting of the facts on UFOs. There is always a taint, and I've been in many documentaries, TV documentaries, mainstream. I've been on live TV in Britain, and they're always got some fun element to the UFO story, and that's sad because there are plenty of facts historically about the subject.
Yeah, it's overwhelming when it comes to the evidence, and you're obviously very much to be thanked for bringing this to the forefront, because there's not a whole lot of investigators that truly focus just on police officers. Recently, I had on.
I think it's unique in the world as a standalone database on one country's police officers, and I've often said, because I have been contacted by US police officers with some of their sightings, which are not on the database, but will be in the book that I will eventually release. There will be a chapter on overseas police officer cases, because I don't see any difference between police officer in whatever country. But I think if you had a serving or retired police officer in every country doing the same kind of job, we would, and if you think about it, you could devolve it down just to pilots in each country, military reports in each country. If we'd have been far better at organising ourselves over the last 50 years as researchers, I think we would have had a database of outstanding cases probably 10 times what we have collectively now.
Yeah, I think there does need to be uniformity to, well, pardon the pun, but, a uniformed effort here and coordinated effort for people to come together. And that is definitely something that this field lacks when I think it comes to teamwork. Everybody says UFO community, but I'm not yet sold on the whole community part of it. But
I would agree with that. However, as we have alluded to in our correspondence before the show, I'm now involved with a Chinese disclosure initiative, which is in its infancy. But I think that promises so far the real opportunity to get a kind of United Nations style forum of universally regarded top experts in each country around the world on UFOs to come forward and say, and this is the mantra, is that they will all have to sign an oath to the effect that they believe that the ET case is proven through a circumstantial evidence point of view from around the world, and that they believe the ET case is proven, and they're going to say that publicly, and they're going to sign up as individual national delegates. That process of recruiting and establishing and identifying those delegates is still ongoing. But the aim is to, once you've got a minimum of 30, you can then approach the United Nations to be recognized as a world governing body. And this new organization is close to that number now. And once that's up and running, then we will begin, I think, to have a major publicity drive to say that the ET issue is solved on a circumstantial basis, and really we should be addressing and moving on and addressing contact much more thoroughly than we are now.
I want to revisit the officer sightings, but since you brought up the Chinese initiative, let's stick with that for a minute. Who is behind that? I mean, who's coordinating that and bringing these people together?
I'm heavily involved in the coordination.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say too much because it is in its infancy,
okay.
But it stems from a meeting in Moscow that was a joint China-Russia meeting, co-hosted meeting, and we met. I was one of the original delegates. There was 9 of us that flew in from various parts of the world to meet with the head of the Chinese leader who of this proposed group, this forum, and basically we've held preliminary talks, and the ongoing process to establish an oath, rules, short-term aims, long-term aims, that kind of thing is all ongoing, and that's what I can't really talk about. But what I can say is that it's funded entirely by the Chinese and has come just literally out of the blue. And I first found out about it in, I think, early September, a couple of weeks before I had my own big magazine conference, and I was invited by Donald Smith, who was one of 2 original people to go to China at the very inception of this idea. The other one being Roberto Pinotti, who's the Italian expert, most famous Italian UFO expert. And they had a meeting in China early last year. And from that, the idea to then start to identify and approach national delegates began. And fortunately, I was nominated to represent Britain.
Wow. I mean, if I can ask this, because I know you can't go into great detail, when you say funded by the Chinese, is there government involvement? Are these private groups, private organizations? Can you even get into that?
I can't get into that.
Okay. All right. That's fair. No.
Read into that what you will.
Sure. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. So that's good. So let me take you back to the officer sightings that you have been talking about, and the on-duty and off-duty sightings. Talk to me about some of what you were hearing. What have police officers been experiencing, and what are they seeing?
Literally what everybody else has been seeing for over 70 odd years. There is no difference. The only thing is that might be surprising to people is that if you look, I'm not a big lover of statistics, having worked in the police, because I think you can twist any statistic any which way you want in reality and put a spin on it. But there are a few statistics for me that I've taken on the database. And one of them is that about 69% of all the cases that are on the database are multiple officer witness reports. Therefore, it's two or more. And what a lot of people won't realize is that they're often 4, 5, 6, in one case, 24 involved in one particular incident. So there are, I think the fact that it's 69%, which is obviously more than 2/3, is a huge number in terms of corroboration of the event, that they're looking at something really strange. But I mean, they see triangles, they see bright white lights in the sky with no distinct shape, they see cylindrical objects, close proximity. There are a couple of cases there that are definitely abduction type. One in particular is a very famous abduction case, widely regarded as Britain's first accepted identification story, which is that of P.C. Allen Godfrey, from coincidentally is the same as Rendlesham, of November 1980, and that's a remarkable tale in itself. And police officers report literally what everybody else sees.
So let me ask you, as a retired detective constable, how important is it when you talk about cases to have multiple witnesses? It's
not absolutely essential, but I guess from a skeptical point of view, it's always better when you do have more than one officer, because it's a lot harder for the skeptics to say that two or more are mistaken. I think the reality is each case has to be weighed up in its merits, and nobody should go into any kind of investigation UFO-wise with a preconceived notion that it's ET or whatever. Basically go in, see what the facts are, see what the testimony is, and make an assessment from there. That's the way I work. But I think that there are some clear, what I would say over the last 70 years, there are some clear things that very quickly point to what I believe is an ET engagement, and that's like instant acceleration, instant stop, vertical high-speed ascent, vertical high-speed descent, right-angle turns, reversals, the ability to render themselves visible and invisible in the blink of an eye. These are what I would say are genuine ET flight characteristics. So if you have a sighting that does one of those things, they actually can be very short in duration. But if you see an object that does a vertical straight up into the sky, as far as I'm aware, that's not something our planes can do. Yeah.
And you mentioned not only with these physical sightings of these craft that are doing things that they shouldn't be able to do, but you mentioned that some of the witnesses came forward with abduction-like stories?
Well, on the database, there is only one that's a true abduction case because he went public with it, and it's Britain's most famous abduction case. And that, do you want me to tell you a little bit about that?
Yeah. Let's go into a little bit more detail on it.
Okay, this is end of November 1980. A police officer, a uniformed police officer called Alan Godfrey, he's going out on he's on a night shift, and he's about to go off duty. And before he goes out, his sergeant says, "Take a look around one more time on a mobile patrol." So he drives around the town where he is, which is Todmorden, which is in West Yorkshire, a small rural town. And basically, as he drives around a corner within the town, he comes across an object that is blocking his path, i.e. blocking the road, and it's hovering about 5 feet off the ground in the middle of the road, and he stops to within 30 meters of the object. His lights are shining off the side of it. He describes it as being like a diamond shape. The bottom half is rotating anti-clockwise, and the top half has got like blackened windows. Can't see anything, but it appears to have like a darkened windows. And because it's November, winter time, the centrifugal force of the lower half is creating a whirlpool of loose sticks and branches from nearby trees underneath it. And what he initially does is he goes to use his main radio set. We've got to remember what it was like then before the cell phone era. And that main set was dead. He went to use his personal radio. That was dead. So he decides to sketch it. He had a sketch board next to him, so he began to sketch it. And then he gets curious and decides to get out of the police car and approach this silent, hovering, strange thing in front of him. And then he decides to change his mind. He gets frightened. He goes back to the police car. And as soon as he gets back to the police car, he then says he has this sensation of being engulfed in white light. And he finds himself in a room of some description with small creatures that he described as lamp heads, like a bedside lamp kind of thing, or bulb heads, electric bulb-shaped heads, bulbous head, putting some kind of equipment on his legs, and he's laid down on some kind of bed structure. And then a humanoid figure comes in, and then that's basically it. And the ironic thing is that there's a time jump. He's driving the police car further up the road, 100 yards further up the road. That's his next conscious memory, is that there's a time jump, that he's suddenly driving further up the road about 100 meters, and he's thinking, what? Where did it go? Turns around, and he finds the centrifugal patch, and it had been raining in the night, and basically where the object had been hovering, it was noticeably drier, and there was a ring of branches around. He then went back to the police station, saw one of his colleagues. He said, "You're not going to believe this. I've just seen a flying saucer." And the police officer got in the car, was kind of thinking, "No, you're crazy," as you would. Texts him back, and I spoke to that police officer, and he confirmed that there was indeed a drier circular patch with all these branches around. Later on, he underwent a lot of hypnosis, 4 hypnosis sessions over the next 12 months, 3 of which were recorded on video. The video's never been shown in their entirety, and sadly never will now, because the owner of the videos, a Manchester solicitor, has sadly got dementia and is no longer able to grant that permission. They have been seen in various documentaries.
Let me jump in real quick. Now, the videos were of the hypnotic regression sessions, or of
3. The first one wasn't videotaped, but the last 3 were. They were literally done every 3 months during 1981, and the last 3 sessions were video. Now, fortunately, during my 18-month on and off investigation of his story, when I began the database, and he lived relatively close, so I got to know him and did a research of the case as best I could with all those years later. I saw the Manchester solicitor, went to his house, and I've been one of the very few people to have seen the 3 video recorded sessions. And my assessment as an advanced interviewer of suspects and witnesses and being trained in body language and psychological techniques is that he deserves an Oscar if he's lying. I believe what he said, and it was fascinating to see him under hypnosis.
Other than seeing the videos, have you met Alan Godfrey as well?
Yeah. Like I said, ironically, when I launched the database in 2002, I was already aware historically in magazines and books about this case, and I made it one of my early aims is to meet him. And I met him and I said, can I research your story? And he was very cooperative, and over an 18-month period, probably 82, 83, 2002, 2003 rather, I researched his story, and my belief is that it's an outstanding case, and it's universally regarded pretty much as Britain's first accepted abduction case. And it's a great case, and I'm obviously only telling you the bare bones of the story, but it's a remarkable case, and I personally believe it's a very good indicator of the abduction phenomenon before the X-Files, before or at the same time, just as Communion with Whitley Strieber's book coming out. So the way he describes the small creatures, 3 to 4 feet high, childlike, and putting equipment on his legs, now is commonplace in abduction, missing time, that kind of thing, is now commonplace, probably because of the X-Files and the popularity of the series alluded to that often, but not in 1980. And so this was just, apart from 1 or 2 famous cases, Villas-Boas, Barney and Betty Hill, Travis Walton, there really weren't that many recognised really good abduction cases, and I think Alan is up there with the British equivalent.
Yeah, it sounds like I've heard the story before and worked on a television series that briefly went over it, and it really is an amazing story. I saw an old interview with Alan Godfrey. They probably filmed it 10, 15 years ago, if not more. He
last year he released his book about the incident, and it's a good book. So I can maybe help you get a copy of that.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to see it. When you first heard Alan's story, did you just read it and go, "Wow, this is amazing. I totally believe him," or did you try and challenge it a bit when you did your 18-month investigation? I mean, did you?
No. Well, yes, I did. Basically, what I did was, I found it very compelling, but of course, initially, I had no experience of dealing with the abduction phenomenon, and this was the first time that I did, and I was at that time, I was genuinely very wary of the abduction phenomena because it's so hard to quantify. As you know, are people making it up or is it genuine? So I was kind of skeptical at that time, but by the end of that 18-month investigation, having tracked down all the police officers, having seen a lot of the things that happened to him as a police officer after his incident, because cutting a long story short, the police force that he belonged to made his life very difficult after that. He was once summoned into a senior officer's room and said, "We want you to sign the Official Secrets Act again." Now, you sign them when you join the police, as you do when you join the military, but you don't ever usually sign them again. But he was called in not too long after his sighting and said, "We want you to sign the Official Secrets Act again," which he found odd. And on the part 2 of the document that he signed was, "You are not to talk about your UFO abduction experience." So that was pretty odd. But I mean, it was really talking to the police officers that knew him, the guy that saw the circular thing, the people who saw him when he came back into the police station. He was white as a sheet kind of thing. And it was following up all the leads that you could do. My overall conclusion was that I see no reason to disbelieve what this man is saying. He was a very credible, sensible no-nonsense police officer. I guess a bit like Lonnie Zamora. He had the integrity, he was investigated, and people were very impressed with him. So I think it's quite a good description to kind of put him alongside Lonnie Zamora from a British point of view.
Now, he was asked to sign the secrecy oath again. Was there any indication of a police-led research program, if that's the right terminology for what they would have? I mean, were they taking reports like Allen's and all of these other police officers that you've encountered that have had UFO sightings, not necessarily abductions in all the cases, but, physical sightings? Was there any indication that the higher echelon of those police forces were taking it seriously, or did they just not want people talking about it?
I mean, we've got to remember the era. This is 1980, and things were very much different in the police in the UK then to what they are now. Then each little town had a number of police officers with a little tiny police station, often if it was a village, and there was a small number to cover a very small area. Now you have huge big control rooms covering 200 square miles of police officers, with many more police officers over a geographical position. It's completely different. The attitude of the police then was very much down to the officers' interpretation or attitude to policing, to UFOs at the time. For example, somebody could ring in and said, "I've just seen this," and sometimes they might get a response where they're, yeah, all right, go back home, you've obviously had a drink, go home, and be dismissive. And then others would, if they obviously had a bit of an interest or an open mind, they would record the details. Sometimes police officers would go out, and in fact, on many occasions, there are a lot of police reports that are generated following an initial civilian report, which, if you think about it, is the most logical thing. Somebody, civilian-wise, sees something, they report it to the police come out and they see it too. There are many, many reports like that. But there was no hard and fast system. Generally, what would happen is that if the police officer did make a report, they would then send that report off to the Ministry of Defence in London for them to decide whether they were going to investigate or not. And invariably, the Ministry of Defence UFO desk, the one that Nick Pope was at for 3 years between 91 and 94, was nothing more than a public relations exercise. It was not a proper investigation tool at all. There may have been one or two, but it was all from the office. They never got out. They never went to places. And it was what I would term the equivalent of the Project Blue Book front desk, which was basically a public relations exercise, and the best sightings didn't go in, which we know about because of the Bolland and Momo. So I think it was very similar to that.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I had Nick on the show not too long ago, and we went into some of the work there. And I think that these governments, when they admit to a UFO research program, it's definitely not a research program. It's more of that.
Absolutely.
It's more of that explanation campaign. But you mentioned police reports. That always piques my interest, just because that's those are official documents. Have you gone after those specific reports? Are you able to go after them?
I go from the basis that generally what happens is that a police officer will contact me. We'll start a dialogue. I will listen, make notes of his report over the phone. Depending on where he lives, I will go see him. It's very much dependent on distance and time with the magazine, things like that. I mean, it's changed over the years. Don't forget, I was a working CID officer, so time was limited. So it generally would be by phone, letter, or email. They'd start a dialogue. I would then ask for them to prove who they were. If they were a serving officer or a retired officer, they needed to convince me of their background and police veracity. And once they'd done that, they were either given confidential source status, they were asked to complete a detailed sighting report form and send that back to me. They were asked to provide evidence of their police career and send me material to convince me of that. But once all that was done, it was a question of logging it and then putting précis account. What you see on the police database, the Proof Force police database, Proof Force standing for Police Reporting UFOs. It's simple if you think about it. PRUFOS, Proof Force Police Reporting UFOs. Basically, what you'll find is a chronological number of reports on there with just a précis of the account. And the idea is to give much more detail when the book is released. A book which I started 3 years ago, but literally got 60% of the way through, and then various other things like the upcoming Capel Green investigation of Rendlesham Forest, that I then put it on the back burner. So I'll go back to that once Capel Green is done. So, but like I'm sure you understand yourself, life sometimes takes an unexpected turn.
Yes,
and gets
it does.
in the way.
Yes,
and so literally that's gone on the back burner. And the Rendlesham Forest incident and the Capel Green scenario has come to the fore. And if I'm going to do a job, I'll try to do it to the best of my ability. And so that the last 18 months has been really a re-examination from literally day one of the incident all the way through to the present. And we're still finding out new stuff now.
I want to get into the Capel Green documentary, but my last question for you about the database that you have built. Again, you can visit the database online, www.prufospolicedatabase.co.uk. It breaks down in various pages in chronological order many of the sightings that you have collected and goes into great detail. It's definitely something I recommend everyone that is listening to check out. Out of everything, and maybe it is the Alan Godfrey case, hopefully not, but do you have a personal favorite, a case that stuck out to you that really made you go, wow?
There's a couple that stand out for me. The sheer incredible visual that it creates in your mind's eye. For example, there was a police officer, a constable called Eric Raymond, who I think it was 1979, in a rural area, maybe 50, 60 miles away from London. He is with two other police officers just talking in a rural area at 2:30 in the morning. They see a bright flash on the horizon for a second. They look, it's gone. They don't think anything more of it. And then literally 5 minutes later, as they are stood there, they see an object just blink on like a light bulb. And it doesn't come from left, doesn't come from right, there's no noise, but this huge object, the size of a football field, suddenly blinks on in front of them. That is the size of a football field. It is scanning the ground, shining a beam down the width of a football field. It's only 500 feet in altitude from them and about 500 meters away from them, which in a rural location and the size of that is extremely close. No noise. There are smaller objects flying around the larger object, and they see this for several minutes, and then suddenly, blink of an eye, it's gone. And that was consternation to the police officers. They were in awe. They didn't know what it was. So that just conjures up a great visual. And then there's another case, and this is a black flying triangle that we hear talked about often. This is from the mid-80s, I think. I think maybe about 100 miles away from London, and basically rural area, two police officers, uniform, in a police car, parked up at the side of the road, and suddenly above the treetops, they suddenly see the sky go dark, and it's gone dark, it's at night, and they see an object the size of what they said was 3 football fields. And when the officer, who was a sergeant, rang me, I said, 3 football fields? How do you know it was that big? And he says, when we saw it, it was above 3 football fields, which is a great validation of size in terms of memory recording of something. So that was, can you imagine, a huge flying silent black triangle the size of 3 football fields hovering just above treetop and then gone in the blink of an eye. 2 officers for corroboration. So those kind of visuals make you realize that this is very much a real scenario. There's no motive for a police officer to make up that. In fact, you risk ridicule if you put your head above the parapet, and many officers have received a great deal of ridicule, although some, like him, like me, have done so and have told about our various experiences. But the vast majority would prefer to be confidential, certainly if they're still serving.
Yeah. And this probably wouldn't be true for some of the older cases, but here in America, a lot of police officers, they've installed dashboard cameras into their car. For some of the newer cases, does the UK police forces, do they have dashboard cams? Do they come with you? Do they come to you with that type of evidence, or does that generally not exist over there?
No. The technology, what you have in the UK is you have a separate department that we would call the traffic police, and the traffic cars are built with onboard front dash cameras to record vehicles in chases and things like that. And there is one case, and I can send you a video link, where a police officer did record a series of spheres that were in a cluster above a hillside as he was driving on a rural road. It's daylight, and he literally, you can see on his dash cam that as he goes around the corner, he becomes aware, and on the video you just see it as a blob because the camera is not that great in quality, but you see this blob of white light above this hill, and you can see the driver is slowing down thinking, what the hell is that? And then as he gets closer, the object begins to blink on and off and then gone, and that's captured. But when you actually read his report, he said it wasn't one object, it was a collection or a cluster of white spheres altogether. But the video camera from 2003, when this wasn't of a good enough quality to distinguish that. So I'm sure there are many, many other sightings. There are also a couple of good sightings. One I investigated recently in 2016 of a police helicopter, and it had a FLIR camera, infrared camera, and that picked up an object going against the wind, no noise. It was tracked, and one of the officers actually put it on Twitter, and that's how I became aware of it. And then that was the thing that launched the investigation. The police force, I've got the footage. Again, I could send a link to that, but they're playing it down, and I was obstructed quite a lot by the police in asking for interviews with the police spotter that made the report. I have his name, but they won't grant me an interview, that kind of thing. So, but it's a very good piece of footage, and that again is quite similar to many other FLIR footage that you can think of. The Mexican from Campeche 2004, but this is a much closer object, and they go through the various different camera, put it into normal vision, and it's not there. And then they put it in infrared, and it's there, and it's a disc shape, and it's very weird, and it has no method of propulsion, and they follow it for about 8 minutes. So it's there are things captured, but the police are not going to release this type of material, and unless an officer contacts me or there is some kind of press knowledge of the case, they're not going to. The police are very secretive about UFO reports, unfortunately, in this country.
Wow. Great cases, great evidence. I really commend you for bringing all of that to the UFO community and sharing those cases, because they do mean a lot when it comes to valid research. Now, before I run out of time with you, I want to make sure that we do cover your work on the new documentary coming out later this year in 2019 called Capel Green. Go ahead and give everybody an overview of what that documentary is all about.
It's all about the Rendlesham Forest story, but it's telling two stories. Principally, it's telling the story of what is, we would say in England, the Capel Green, not Capel. We would say Capel Green. And the Capel Green scenario is a fantastic story that Larry Warren, a controversial figure, the original military whistleblower of the case, from 82-83, his story, and I know that there's a lot of controversy recently about that, but I've looked at all the evidence that says that he wasn't involved, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't stand up to scrutiny through my mind's eye as a detective. I'm not going to put my reputation on the line to cover a lie or perpetrate a hoax, as, say, Nick Pope is claiming now, which is ridiculous. Why would I do that? It's ridiculous. Why would I risk everything that I've tried to achieve to perpetrate a lie on the UFO community? It's just silly. But anyway, by the by, what I'm saying is that storyline is incredible, because basically what Larry Warren would say, and he was the first military witness to put his name to it about what he saw, and he basically said that on what is regarded as the Holt-Warren night, it's the same night as Holt's out there. People refer to it as the third night. It could be a fourth night. The dates are still a mess, and that will be discussed in the film. But basically, it's the same night as when Colonel Holt is out there. And basically what Larry Warren will say is this Capel Green scenario. Capel Green is a farmer's field, and basically what he will say is that having been picked up from a small single officer perimeter post, he was picked up in a vehicle, taken onto the base to get light halls, which are the big light structures, portable generators to put light into the forest, and then basically he's brought to the edge of the forest, and on the edge of the forest he sees a farmer's field that he didn't know existed, and in the field he says there is a strange yellow mist that's about a foot off the ground, 30 centimeters off the ground, in a 50-foot circular patch. It's strange mist. There are security police around it, and then he is told to go in the field. Then there is a red light the size of a beach ball that stops over the mist, and then suddenly there's an explosion of light, and then there is a structured craft where the mist had been. It gets even more bizarre as they're all there watching this strange thing. He's saying that this has been video recorded, cine-filmed on a tripod on the right-hand side, that there are two British police officers in the background nearby taking photographs on their own cameras. And then even more bizarrely, he says that he describes it like a bubble slipping off the fabric of this craft that then separates into three bubbles, and within three bubbles there is a head, an upper torso of a what he describes as kind of like a ghost-like, white light, very ghostly figure inside upper torso. And then finally, if it wasn't strange enough as it is, then a number of senior officers turn up, walk into the field where this object is, where the police officers are, and then there is a silent kind of face-off between three floating entities and what we believe is the base commander of a nuclear strike base, General Williams, as he is retired general. He was colonel at the time. Now, it's a fantastical story, but that's what his original story was. And my job, in a sense, was, having met him many times, as an advanced interviewer of suspects and witnesses. I've talked to him many times. I've heard him being asked about this many times by people, and being very consistent on that. And I believe the story, but the question was, is there evidence to support it? So that sets up the premise. When I was asked by the director of what turns out to be an independent production to be the lead researcher and co-writer, I said, okay, I'll look into it. I suggested that he first get a polygraph test, which he said he would always be prepared to do. He passed the polygraph test with flying colours to that scenario, and the polygraph examiner had done 2,000 tests. She's the leading person in Britain, so an impeccable source. And basically on the strength of that, I said, right, you've got your story now. I'm now going to research it. And over the last 18 months, I've gone to day one, as I should do if I'm going to do something serious like this, and examine every single piece of evidence. And the long and short of it, and I know time is short, is there is overwhelming evidence that this incredible event really did happen. And that's why Larry Warren is so controversial, because I think there's a lot of cover-up going on by various people, including the US Air Force, the British government, and various other agencies. They do not want this story to get out, and the amount of material to confirm that this event happened is amazing. Surprised me on how many confirmations, and so this is a total re-examination. And I might add that Colonel Holt, John Burroughs, Jim Penniston were all asked to take part, and they all shunned it. Well, that's for them to do. But the amount of material that's coming out, I think, will totally redefine what we think of as the Rendlesham Forest incident.
I'm going to link the trailer to Capel Green in the show notes. I didn't mean to Americanize it by saying Capel, so I apologize for that. But
No, that's just British.
Yeah, well, leave it to the American to mess it up anyway. But so the Capel Green trailer is going to be in the show notes page. I gotta say, it looks like it's got great production value. I'm sure the story is going to be good. I'm looking forward to it. I want to ask you about what you just brought up. I interviewed John Burroughs recently on this program, and what I was amazed by, and I actually got a lot of feedback from the audience, was that John was very open with the fact that various people involved in the case had various versions of the story. And what was interesting about John's interview, and I want to get kind of your take on this, is that he just said, look, this is what I remember. Other people remember it differently, but he wasn't saying he was right. He wasn't saying he was wrong. He was just saying, hey, look, this is what I remember. Why do you think, in your opinion, if you don't mind me asking, did they kind of shun this project? Why wouldn't they want to add their voice into it as well?
It's a really complicated question to answer quickly.
Okay.
But the simple answer with regards to John, if you think of Rendlesham Forest and in all the documentaries you've seen over the last 15, 20 years, you would automatically think of Colonel Holt, Jim Penniston, John Burroughs, and occasionally Larry Warren. It's become very political, and they're effectively the three witnesses I've just mentioned, Penniston, Burroughs, and Holt, have got three different variations or agendas. John is ridiculing me, publicly tries to ridicule me on Facebook. I would never do that to anyone who was a serious researcher. John has done some great work, had at least two great sightings, well, three events really in his story. Two from the first night, and two from what is regarded as the Holt Warren night. I'm glad he said that. I don't have a problem with John. John's trying to establish the truth, but he has tried to write out Larry Warren in the last 2 years. He seems to have changed his little stance in the last 6 months, but for the last 18 months, he's saying he won't there, blah, blah, blah. I don't know why. 2-3 years ago, we were at a conference where all of us were together, John, Larry, and I, and everything was happy. So this is politics aside. It's a very complicated. I think Holt has some questions to ask. I had a 7-year collaboration period with him. In the end, one of the reasons why that ended was because he started attacking Larry Warren without producing the evidence to back up his claims. If you're going to diss somebody, you've got to produce the evidence, and the evidence has to stack up. And unfortunately, one, he didn't produce it, and two, the subsequent evidence of people that he is now associated with, a troll campaign for the last 2 years, it doesn't add up. It's abusive. I've been trolled for the last 2 years because I'm supporting Larry Warren. I'm only going to support Larry Warren if I think the evidence is there, and believe me, I think it is. But it's very abusive. Nick Pope, we used to be affable with each other. He is now saying I should be arrested for bringing the UFO community into disrepute by perpetrating a hoax. Well, that's ludicrous. Why would I do that? So I would have to ask you, people are going to have to ask him after the documentary comes out, why a lot of stuff that I'm going to bring up wasn't in his book. Put it that way.
Admittedly, I'm not up on the kind of the politics, because it sounds like there's a lot of headbutting here, and I don't want to, talk bad about anybody.
I don't agree with headbutting. And one of the things that I really make a big point is that in life, people are never going to disagree. People and politics, those kind of things, religion. And you, in a civilized society, you agree to disagree.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, with the troll campaign, which is active and I can prove, and if anybody wants to see a document that I put out, all they have to do is email me, and in the words of the trolls themselves, you can make your own mind up. They can just email. I'll quite happily send it to anybody. But realistically, what annoys me is that Colonel Holt is in touch with these trolls that are not just disagreeing, but they are personally abusive. They swear, they say, I'm a liar, a con man, a fraud. That isn't right.
Yeah.
That people can say this thing on a social media platform without the evidence to back it up. And that's unfortunately, I don't think that casts Colonel Holt in, and this only applies to Holt, in a good light, because he and Nick Pope, Peter Robbins, sadly, are all in mix and in regular conversation with these trolls that are dishing out personal abuse, sexual abuse comments, terrible comments, totally unsubstantiated. And I don't think that is professional. And in any dispute, whatever the subject, you should not have to resort to name calling to try to achieve your aims. So I take strong exception to that.
No, I don't blame you.
Something I will never do, and I never have, and never will.
Well, I wish not to make light of it, I wish I had a nickel for every time that somebody called me a name or attacked me over something, because I would be rich. So I'd be really excited about that. But I don't blame you, and there's really no room for that in these types of debates. And so let's get away from that. I have one last question for you, because I'm interested in the bigger picture here when it comes to Rendlesham, which is very intriguing for me as kind of an outsider. I don't consider myself a Rendlesham investigator. I'm familiar with the story more just from the quote unquote official side when it comes to the Holt memo and stuff. I'm not saying that's real or not, but that's obviously where I focus is official documents. What I'm interested in, and I just want to ask you this last question, is why, and again, politics and personal attacks and all that silliness aside, why is there, in your opinion, these varying degrees of stories? Because it sounds like even the ones that are attacking your side, if I can say it that way, that they don't agree with each other either. And that was kind of what came out with John's interview with me.
That's what I said. The sad thing is, having written a book with Nick Pope, John takes the mickey out of Nick Pope. I'm Jim Peniston, who's his co-author. They attack each other. John will quite rightly attack Holt for not admitting some aspects of John's account for over 20-odd years, so he's right to pursue that. And it's really kind of very messy. But the bottom line is, with the Capel Green scenario, why it's, why Nick Pope would write to top researchers and say this is a fraud. And I think your name may have been on that list in an email, which is a disgrace. To my mind, is they know that not everything that should have come out has come out. And I think that Larry Warren, bear in mind he's the original whistleblower, went public in '83. He's been around a long time and told the same consistent story, that basically that event in the field, and I'm saying if it was true from their point of view, would cause great embarrassment to the US Air Force, great embarrassment to the American government, great embarrassment to the British government, great embarrassment to the British military. I'm telling you, all my research says that this is indeed true, so watch out, Capel Green is coming.
Well, I'm looking forward to the documentary just to see the story. Again, the production value looks pretty solid, so I will link over to that trailer in the show notes, www.theblackvault.com/show notes. I will also link to Gary's police report database of all the UFO sightings that he has collected, including some other links that he and I have talked about. Gary, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
John, sure. Sorry to interrupt you, but as we're leaving, as I alluded to you in the warm-up, anybody that wants a complimentary copy of UFO Truth magazine, if I may, just 10 seconds, all they have to do is email me, and if you put a link on your website, heseltine@hotmail.com, and there's 34 issues to choose from. Choose one of those, give me your email, say that you saw listen to the John Greenewald show, and I will gladly send them a complimentary copy, whichever number they want.
I really appreciate you doing that for everybody, so make sure that you do check out those show notes. I will go ahead and link over to his email address as well. And anything else you want to add in before I let you go there, Gary?
No. I appreciate the opportunity to come on your show. Like you, I'm a big fan of the Black Vault. You've done incredible work. You should get a high praise for that on not just UFO documents. It's the best place in the world for any documentation So you deserve an award for your efforts to bring real evidential material, documentary evidence, which in policing terms in the UK means anything written, to the fore. And you've done an outstanding record, and it's been a privilege to finally say hello.
Well, I appreciate that. You're welcome on the show anytime, and I really, coming from you, appreciate those kind words. So thank you very much for joining me here on the Black Vault Radio.
I'm just thinking on that obviously at the moment, until the film has come out, I can't reveal the necessary information that I will be able to reveal afterwards. So I suggest a really informative show would be to have me back on after the documentary, when I can tell you everything that I discovered.
Yeah, well, when that comes out, when you have an official date, you let me know, and we'll get you right back on.
All right, John, thank you very much.
Thank you. Although that concludes my interview with retired Detective Gary Heseltine, don't go away. Coming up, I'll explore what I feel is one of the most powerful tools when using the Freedom of Information Act. This segment may not be for everyone, but to the hardcore researchers out there utilizing the FOIA, you will want to utilize this. Stay tuned. In this episode's TBV Unredacted, I want to talk about a very powerful tool for all those utilizing the Freedom of Information Act, or the FOIA. Now, this is not going to connect to my interview with Gary Heseltine, nor is it going to be about UFOs. It can be, I'll explain that in a second, but no, this doesn't connect. What I want to do in this TBV Unredacted is talk about what I believe is a very underused tool when it comes to the FOIA and filing Freedom of Information Act requests. Now, most requesters, now this isn't true 100% of the time, but most requesters are actually not aware that when you file a FOIA request to an agency, I'll use the CIA because they hate me right now, and I'll just use them as the example. When you file a request to the CIA or any government agency, the request immediately gets a FOIA case number. So every way that every agency numbers the cases is going to vary from case to case. I wish there was some uniformity to it. Unfortunately, there are not. So you just have to learn as you go. Some agencies are fiscal year, others are calendar year. That makes things even more confusing because sometimes you're filing in 2018 and all of a sudden your case number says 2019. Well, what does that mean? Well, again, it's the fiscal year, so you have to adapt with agency to agency. But here's where the tool comes in. Every time something gets into the FOIA system and the agency assigns it a FOIA case number, it then goes in their database, wherein you can request a log of all of the case numbers. This is called a FOIA case log. Now, why am I bringing this up? Why is this so powerful? Because it shows you a few very interesting things. Number one, you can research what other people are investigating. You can see, for the most part, their names or organization names, so you can kind of see what news agencies are filing FOIA requests, what journalists, what are they going for. Even on the corporate level, corporations filed to see what their competitors are requesting, if anything at all. Because under the FOIA, you can request contracts. Not everything is releasable, but you can go into what your competitors are dealing with. So this is very cool for the conspiracy government secret hunters. This is also very cool for corporate America because it is a powerful tool to kind of snoop as much as you can legally on what your competitors are doing with the United States government. Now, how do you get these logs? Well, the process is simple. You file a FOIA request for a log. You can go down to a day if you want, a week, a month, or a year. I stick with a year. I've created a massive database of tens of thousands of pages of logs from 75, I'm guessing, but maybe 75 different agencies and offices. And it breaks it down by year or chunks of years. But you can go on there and download the logs. Now, these are incredibly powerful, not only for the reasons I just mentioned, but on top of that, to start to get leads. Because some of the logs, some of the agencies will actually tell you how many pages were released in the final outcome of the case. That's not true across the board, sadly. I wish it was, because you can get an idea that if somebody said, hey, give me everything that you have on the X-37, or the X-43 or Operation, Tombstone or whatever it might be, and you know that there's 109 pages that were responsive and that were released, well, you know that there's a good chunk of information there. You can go after it, get it, analyze it, and then take the next step in your research. And so that's why this is a very powerful, but also very underused tool. I would recommend anybody filing Freedom of Information Act requests, take a look at those logs, see what you can glean from it, and see what others have done before you. Because sometimes you'll also find that you really want something on, let's say, Operation Tombstone, but you don't know if it was a real operation or not. You can find it in the log and see if something was released or if it was denied. Now, every log is different. Again, one of those frustrating things about the FOIA, but it's a powerful tool nonetheless. So eventually I wanted to do this segment on TBV Unredacted because I wanted you all to know about the powerful tool that is the FOIA case log. One other thing that you will also note, and I'll link this over in the show notes page, is that not only do all FOIA cases go into a big database and can be generated on a log, so do the appeals. Most agencies, again, not all, but most agencies will actually create then an appeal log. That's step number 2. Let's say you got denied for going after everything on Operation Tombstone with the CIA, and they say, well, we have no records, or they're classified, so we're not going to tell you. If you feel you have grounds to appeal, that's that second step. There is a different log for some agencies that then outline all of the appeal numbers. To me, that's a little bit more interesting because then you get to see what people won. Not lost, but won when it came to appealing FOIA cases. The third log I'll bring up, and that all kind of connects, is an MDR log, or a mandatory declassification review log. You've heard me talk about MDRs a little bit in TBV Unredacted, probably quite a few times now, because then that process has led to the declassification of documents that, in some cases, have never seen the light of day before. MDR requests are actually given different types of numbers, again, most agencies, and can be generated on a log. To me, this is the most powerful aspect to all of these tools and all of these logs, because now you get to see what documents have been freshly declassified, go after those, see what's in the record that's been newly declassified, and again, take that next step. One thing I've learned that all FOIA requesters, sometimes I'm using Operation Tombstone. I made that up, by the way. Nobody file who knows? Maybe there is an Operation Tombstone, but I'm just making it up for example's sake for the CIA. But let's just say somebody goes after records and it's not what they want. It may be what you want. So never operate off the assumption that that FOIA requester who got those documents took the next step and said, oh, well, now I can go to the DIA because they held some kind of role in that operation when they were in Laos. Don't assume that other requesters did that, because you could be the one that could pry loose documents that have never before seen the light of day. How do I know that? It's happened to me on countless occasions, and it is the best feeling in the world. So, although this might be a little dry for some of you are scratching your head going, why did I just listen to this? Well, it had to be said and done because those of you, probably a small percentage, but those of you who do utilize the FOIA, who should be appealing those FOIA cases, and who are filing MDRs, and if you aren't, you should be, these logs are invaluable. I go into a little bit more about the Freedom of Information Act in a previous episode with Mr. Nate Jones from the National Security Archive. He is one of the very few that I respect in the FOIA arena. So if this is up your alley, definitely make sure you listen to that interview, because Nate goes into great detail on appealing the Freedom of Information Act process and much, much more. So thank you all for listening to this episode. This is John Greenewald Jr. signing off. We'll see you next time.